Okay, welcome everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our first ever Wholesaler Mixologist Minute. We're really excited to have you. To have the best experience possible tonight and to be able to follow along with our mixologist, we strongly recommend that you set your view option to speaker view. You can find that option at the top right of your screen. Today, Wine and Spirit Wholesalers of America's very own Dawson Hobbs will be joined by Troy Clarke, Director of Mixology and Spirits Education at Martignetti Company, who will be teaching you multiple variations of a classic summer cocktail, the Negroni, and there will definitely be lots of tips and tricks along the way. Before we get started, I just want to let you guys know that if you have any questions at all about techniques, substitutions, or mixology in general, that we are here to answer your questions tonight. So please don't hesitate to use the Q&A button found at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. So with that, I will turn it over to Dawson.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I want to welcome everybody to our very first Wholesaler Mixology Minute. We're very happy to have Troy with us today. And hopefully this can provide everybody with a little bit of a break during the stay-at-home period here during the COVID crisis. I'm Dawson Hobbs, the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America. WSWA represents America's wine and spirits distributors. And all told, our members distribute about 80% of the wine and spirits sold in the United States. And by distribute, what we mean is we're the ones who buy it from wineries and distilleries all over the world. And then we sell it to bars, restaurants, sporting venues, package stores, liquor stores, grocery stores, and all the other retail outlets. As you can imagine, this has been a challenging time for our industry with the closure of all of those restaurant and bar and sporting venue type customers. We've lost about 25% of our business overnight. And our members are trying to find new and innovative ways to stay in touch with their customers during this time. We'll hear a little bit more about that from Troy later. But right now, we're just doing our best, and our members are doing their best to keep servicing the businesses that are open and keep their customers and their employees safe. Troy, as Christina said, is with Martignetti Distributors out of Boston, Massachusetts. He's an award-winning mixologist, winning several awards, as you can see there on our left side of his bar from the WSWA convention over the years. And in the pre-COVID time, he would spend his days educating bars and restaurants and other venues on new and innovative cocktails and trends. Obviously, with those closures, he's trying to find new ways to do that, and we'll hear about that in a bit. But Troy, maybe start with telling people what you would do in a normal day during the regular times.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dawson. I appreciate it. Appreciate being a part of the first mixologist broadcast here. My typical day, I do about 150 beverage programs a year where I personalize and sit down with owners, beverage directors, sommeliers, bartenders, and help design their beverage program and personalize it to the style of the restaurant that they have. With these closures, makes it a little bit difficult to do that, so that would be the bulk of my time, on top of training bartenders, designing the ebb and flow of restaurants with owners when they're opening up new establishments, and then training all of our sales force to better understand the world of spirits.
So if we come to Massachusetts, we should ask you where the fun bars are, right?
Absolutely. I'd be happy and honored to take you around our city.
Well, great. Let's get started. What are you going to teach us to make today?
When we talked about doing something, I said, there's no other place I want to start than at the very beginning, which is the Negroni. It is my favorite cocktail. It's my go-to cocktail. And, it's a drink that you can't screw up. So that's one of the things that I think is always a good one to have in your back pocket when you're entertaining with friends coming over, or you just want something that's easy to make at home. There's many different variations on it, but there's really three things that you need. It's a 3-ingredient drink, and it doesn't require you know, a shaking tin or any kind of special vessels. We can pretty much do it with anything. You need some form of spirit. Classically, it was gin. Some form of vermouth. Classically, it would have been sweet red vermouth. And then some form of bitter, classically being Campari. But the fun thing is we can make variations on any of this. And I think that's what we're going to try to work with. You're going to have some different ingredients than I have, and we're going to have a little play on what are we going to be utilizing today.
I've got, here on my bar, I've got Citadel Gin, I've got the Campari and Vermouth, so maybe we'll start there.
All right, well, excellent. The first thing we're going to need from everybody is they're going to need some form of a vessel to be making this in. So I have my double old-fashioned glass here. You can put the ice in now, or you can put the ice in afterwards. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to build it neat just so you can watch the progression, which makes it easy. And you can do the same also. And then we're going to start with our first ingredient. Now, the recipe calls for classically all equal parts. I like a little bit stronger of a cocktail. You know, I'm used to drinking things neat. So I like a little bit more punch in my drink. So I like 1.5 ounces of my lead ingredient. You can use gin if you have it at home. You can use bourbon. You can use rye. You can use anything you want. I'm going to use rum. So mine, I'm going to use, I have 2 different rums here that we're going to use. I have a single estate Jamaican pot stilled rum called Hamden. And then I'm going to use a cachaça. So we're going to do 1.5 ounces of however you want. I'm going to do 3/4 of an ounce of each ingredient. So
Should I go ahead and add ice in the glass or not?
You can do it neat, or you can add it afterwards, whatever you prefer. Are you using a big cube, or are you using?
Yeah, I've got the big cubes.
Oh, all right. Go ahead and put it in first.
You prefer those for this kind of drink?
I love a big cube, but you know what? When we do it at my house, we make it in very, very large quantities because we don't, as we drink more of them, we don't want to have to worry about measuring or how much or balancing things out. So we typically put lots of it and done, and then we just pour it over ice.
So if you were to do that, you use a pitcher or something like this and just keep
absolutely. We could batch the whole thing. And the great thing, I think there's another thing, we'll talk about batching in a few minutes because there's some tricks and tips we can do about that.
Great.
So I've done 3/4 of an ounce of each spirit. So you did 1.5 ounces of your gin?
I did.
All right. Now the next ingredient we're going to need is vermouth. Did you put your vermouth in already?
No,
you did
I
Campari.
went to the Campari.
All right, so for a bitter, there's a couple things we can do. I want to talk a little bit about this. There's lots of bitters. You have Campari, I have Galliano Aperitivo, I have a Spanish bitter, I have another Italian bitter. I have one out of Brooklyn also called Inferno bitter. I'm going to use Select. This was the original bitter for the spritz. I like this. So we're going to do 1 ounce of this in our cocktail today. Okay, so many different options. And the red is typically for the beginning of your meal, meaning aperitif, and those dark bitters are typically the digestifs for the end of your meal. Okay, so I'll get some of these out of the way. The next thing we're going to need is our vermouth. What do you have for vermouth today, Dawson?
I've got Martini and Rossi.
Awesome, awesome. So I'm going to use another Torino style. I'm using Foro, so a nice light. We're going to use 1 ounce of that also. So go ahead and take 1 ounce, put it right in our drink. And there's lots of different vermouths that can be had. I have one here that has a little bit of bitter in it, Punta Mez. I have a Spanish style vermouth. Depending on the spirit that you choose, maybe you want to do a white vermouth if you're doing tequila, or you're doing a white spirit. Could be with gin, could be with vodka. There's lots of variations that we could do, and I even have a rosé vermouth. So lots of fun and iterations that make it really simple. So now that we have all of our ingredients mixed in there, I'm going to add my ice at this point. And the great thing about this is once you put your ice in, you can stir it. The first sip's going to be a little bit warm until you stir it. If you don't stir it, it'll eventually get cold, which makes it nice. So I can go ahead and do this. Not required, but always fun. You can use any teaspoon at home. You can use a chopstick. You know, nothing is really required here. Now, most would say I'm done here. There is one more step. There's a garnish. maybe a slice of an orange, classically, an orange twist, a lemon twist, any fruit. But during COVID times, I'm not wasting fruit putting it on my cocktail. I'm saving that to eat. So cheers.
Cheers.
Absolutely.
Nice.
So I want to talk a little bit about batching this cocktail. You mentioned you had a pitcher, right?
Yep.
We typically make them in decanters here. And basically you take the same amount of proportion. So 1.5 ounces, 1, or 1, whatever your proportion that you like. And you multiply that by however many drinks you want to make. I want to make 10 drinks. I want to make 5 drinks. Put it into the vessel the size that you have in the right proportion. Sit there. You can leave it out on the counter. Every day you come home, put a glass of ice, pour it over. You're ready to go, or you're having some friends over. Nice and easy. So the only time you don't add anything is when you're playing with bitters, actual bitters, what we call non-potable. And we do those to order. We don't want to be batching that in anything.
And also, if you were making a drink that had a fruit juice or something like that in it, could you batch it with it, or would you add the fruit juice?
So you can do it, but you want to be, that's something that you want to be doing, where you're going to be serving it within a few hours, and you want to keep it cold the whole time. So keep it on ice. You can batch it, shake it up a little bit every time before you go to pour it. You totally can do that, and no issues. You just don't want to be keeping it for too long, because the juice doesn't last too long, right? Without getting too technical on things. So simple juice at home, or you're buying some juice at the store, you can batch it all together and serve it like a punch style, which is kind of fun.
So DC is a big brown spirits market, a lot of bourbon drinkers. If you were going to make this drink with bourbon, would you alter your ratios at all, or keep it?
I would. So, being that people like a lot of brown goods nowadays, we do a take on the Negronis called the Boulevardier. And that's using bourbon, and then I would do about 1.5 ounces of that, and then 3/4 of the vermouth and the Campari. And so you're just cutting that back a little bit. Once again, you really can't make a mistake. If you want it a little bit more sweet, you want it a little bit more bitter, you add those up a little bit. You want the bourbon to be dominant, you can pour a little bit heavier on that. That's what's great about this cocktail, is there's no wrong variation. It's how you like to enjoy it. One thing that I notice is a lot of people don't have vermouth at home, right? So what do I do if I don't have vermouth? Well, what I always tell people is, if you have a bottle of wine, it's not the perfect thing, but these are COVID times here. So we gotta, do with what we have. So take a bottle of red wine, take a bottle of white wine, take a bottle of rosé, whatever you have, depending on what you're drinking it with. Add a little teaspoon of sugar syrup in there, and that will often sweeten up the wine. And now you have a makeshift vermouth. Without all the herbs and things like that. So there's always shortcuts to be had.
Well, speaking of COVID times, how are you staying in touch with all your customers in this virtual world?
It's a lot easier now because of technology. During this time, what I've been doing is we've been focusing on training and educating and keeping sharp. And so I've been leading myself and my counterpart, who handles the wine portion for the company. We've been leading trainings and helping people deepen their knowledge. We partner with the Society of Wine and utilize their curriculum. And we've been training everyone in the entire company on deepening their knowledge and better understanding the products that are out there, the categories, distillation, and all the things that affect our world, on top of techniques and sales and all these different tools that we have in our company, and utilizing Zoom and WebEx and Microsoft Teams and all these things to stay in contact, and calling our customers to make sure that they have a voice and let them know we're here for them during these difficult times.
Wow, that sounds exciting. I wish I could sit in on some of those.
Roy, we have a few questions from some of our viewers. Michelle asks that she was told vermouth goes bad. Is that right?
So that's a really great question. Vermouth is a wine, and eventually it will go bad based on the quality of it. I always recommend with your vermouth to refrigerate it, but it's good for some vermouth makers will talk about up to 6 months that you don't need to refrigerate theirs. I always recommend refrigerating it. And dating it. As soon as you open that bottle, put the date that you opened it, and that will let you know how long. I would say that you're good for a few months, absolutely. So no rush to finish it like the red wine or the white wine within a few days.
Awesome, thanks. We have another question from a different Michelle asking, under what conditions do you need to refrigerate the batch versus leaving it on the counter?
It's another really great question. So anytime you're adding something like citrus, or if you're putting anything in there that is shelf stable, you want to refrigerate it. Anytime it's alcohol and alcohol, that's why I like stirred cocktails. This is all spirit friendly, right? I don't have to refrigerate this. The Negroni, I batch the whole thing. I leave it on the shelf. If I batch an old fashioned per se, I don't batch in the bitters, but I'll do the sugar syrup and the bourbon or the whiskey or whatever I'm using my old fashioned, and I'll leave that in my decanter. I'll pour out what I want, and I do my bitters to order whenever I pour the drink over fresh ice. So anytime it's alcohol and alcohol, bitters become alcohol, you can leave it at room temperature. Anything that's shelf stable that requires refrigeration in your batch, that's when you want to refrigerate.
Awesome.
Something like that, the Manhattan or old fashioned with the sugar, would you want to stir it before pouring it just to make sure it stays mixed? Or
so sugar syrup is miscible, it dissolves right in, so you should be pretty good. Once you've stirred it in, you make the initial batch, stir it in, it's not going to fall out, so you should be pretty good. And also keep in mind, if you're like, oh, I don't have any flavored syrups or I don't have anything, but I have a really juicy red wine or I have a really fruity rosé, you can make a syrup out of that with sugar and put wine right into it. So you can make a wine syrup, which is really fun. Or maybe you have some agave syrup and you want to make a margarita. You can do an agave wine syrup and do 2 ounces of tequila, 1 ounce lime juice, and 1 ounce wine syrup, and boom, now you have like a wine flavored margarita.
wow, great.
We have a couple other questions too, Troy. You talked a little bit about some substitutes for bitters. What's a substitute for vermouth, and would it change the ratio?
Yeah, so the substitute, which I was talking about, is one, making it to order, taking some wine or maybe some older wine that's maybe not so much that you want to drink. You can add some sugar into that, slightly oxidized. You can make a syrup out of it and use that in play. In your vermouth. Maybe you have some thyme and rosemary in your garden, and you can throw that into the cocktail a little bit with the different bittering agents, whether you have a Campari. You don't have a Campari for your bitter agent, there's lots of other things. There's like Montenegro, you can use Fernet Branca, you can use like a Punta Mez, many different things, Ibo Libo. So there's many different things that you can use in place of that. And the great thing is, use whatever your base ingredient that you love to drink. So if you love gin, or you love vodka, or you're a fan of rye whiskey, whatever it is, use that as your base, and then pick the bittering agent that you love the best. So usually the darker ones go really nice with the brown goods, and then the lighter spirits go really good with more of the red ones, but that's not always the general case. Everything pretty much can go together. It's all flavors.
And these bitter agents, they last a long time, right? So if you buy it and only use a little bit, you know you'll have it for later.
Yeah, they're not going to go bad at all. So they're just like another bottle of booze, because they've been fortified. So there's plenty of length and time. So if you only use a couple ounces today, you got weeks and months and years until they go bad. So it's a good investment from that, opposed to the bottle of wine you got to finish. It's forcing you to drink faster.
Great. We have a couple other questions too, Troy. You've been measuring things out in ounces tonight. If you don't have a fully stocked bar at home and you don't have a measuring jigger, what can you use instead?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And when I run out or when I'm traveling in somewhere and I don't have all my tools, a couple things I always rely on that I know people have is, one is measuring cups when I'm doing large batches. So when I multiply the recipe up, I can use a measuring cup. And then if I'm just making a single version, depending on the size of your teaspoon. So if you have a really small teaspoon, it would be 2 of them. 2 teaspoons would be 1/4 ounce. And if it's more of a larger one, it'd be 1 teaspoon would be 1/4 ounce. So 4 of those larger teaspoons would make 1 ounce. So if I'm going to do 1.5 ounces, I know that I'm going to do 6 teaspoons. And that would help me balance out where I need to go if I want to kind of figure out what ratio I like, instead of just randomly pouring it and then you fall in love with the calculations that you poured and not know what you had.
And I use the same one I use for cooking, which I think cost me about $3 at the grocery store.
Yeah, the OXO, right? That's the OXO jigger,
Yeah.
right? Those are great. They're see-through. It just allows, the idea is that it sits flat on the counter while you pour, so you don't have to worry about trying to balance it, and then it just drops right in. They're really, really nice. And it goes all the way down to a 1/4 ounce up to 2 ounces. And if you fill above the 2 ounce line, it goes to 3 ounces.
Great. We have a few more questions about batching. Mitch wants to know, can you barrel age a batch of Negronis? His roommate has a barrel sitting on the counter just waiting to be filled with something.
Yes, I love it. So one thing you want to do, you want to make sure you, what we call, season the barrel. So if he has it sitting there, make sure you fill it with water. And what it needs to do is the wood needs to swell so that it doesn't leak. You don't want to put all your booze in there and then it starts leaking out. So what you do is you fill it with water, let it sit there for a few days, swell, let the wood swell up. It will leak in the very beginning. So just have it on a tray or something or near somewhere that you're not worried about that. Then make your batch of the Negroni that you like, test it, make sure it tastes good, and then add it in there and let it sit. Warmer conditions will impact the wood faster. Cooler conditions will take longer over time. And then you can have fun. You can make all different variations and keep aging them, and there'll be layers and layers and layers of flavor that will come through from using the barrel from the previous batch to the previous batch to the previous batch. So that can be fun.
Awesome. And then one last batch question. How do you proportion egg whites for batches? Is that something you recommend?
Probably not something I want to recommend, but what you can do in place of egg whites, some of you may or may not have heard of this. It's called aquafaba, the water of beans. You can go and buy a cheap can of chickpeas, and the water in the chickpeas will do the same effect as an egg white. It will foam up your cocktail. It will last for about 5 days as long as you keep refrigerating in and out. It doesn't clump up. It's easier to use, so you can batch that in. But not really something I want to be batching because you want to get the frothing effect, and over time it just sits. So you lose the effect of what you're trying to achieve with the egg white or the chickpea water in your cocktail.
Great. And then one of the last questions we have here, can you make it with a canned cocktail?
Yes. So I love that you have that. I was just going to say, say you run out of your bourbon, your tequila, your rum, whatever it is, and all you're left with is your vermouth and your bitter, and you're like, what am I going to do? Well, canned cocktails are awesome simply because you're outside doing yard work or you're walking around getting fresh air, and you're like, what am I going to do? I don't want to make a drink. I pop open, a vodka soda. I have a grapefruit vodka soda, which just happens to go really great with anything that's red and bitter and also vermouth. And so now we put those two ingredients together, about 1.5 ounces of each of them, or equal parts in any proportion. And now we have an Americano, which is the precursor to the Negroni. So before the Negroni was born, it was an Americano. So this just gives it a little bit more kick because it's vodka based opposed to just being grapefruit soda. So canned cocktails are a great way to add your base spirit in and only have to buy 2 things. And then you can also drink it when you don't want to mix it in a cocktail. So it's allowing you to drink all day, lower alcohol in your canned cocktail, Americano / Negroni style cocktails.
That's cool.
Oh, we just got another question in. Cuisine-wise, what would you pair a Negroni with?
Oh, you know what? The great thing about a Negroni is it goes with everything. So it's basically, because of the aperitif style, it's meant to be your starter, but you'll notice it goes great with burgers. It goes great with vegetarian food. It goes great with pasta. And if you keep changing the vermouth and the bittering agent, you can progress with Negroni style cocktails all night long, which is really nice. So you start with the red, and then as you get to into the evening and later in the evening, I go to the darker bittering agents and maybe a different style vermouth, and I end with something a little bit darker. So you can start out with mezcal and tequila and gin or vodka, and then as I slowly end the evening, maybe I'm going into a digestif style Negroni, and maybe I just end up drinking everything neat.
I'd say it definitely has a backyard barbecue flavor for me. So.
Yeah, ribs, smoking. There's a lot of things that I think are really fun that you can pair with a Negroni. And as you start making them and experimenting, you're going to really see it's such a versatile drink.
Is that the last of our questions?
One just came in from Nicole. What is your favorite bitter flavor?
Ooh, that is a tough one. I am a huge fan of from a bitter. I love these guys out of Brooklyn. These guys are really, really cool. They do everything all natural. Saint Agresti. All the coloring comes from hibiscus. It's a small little craft distillery. They make their own bottled spritz, so you just have to pop it and drink it. They also do a 4-pack of bottled Negronis already made for you, which also makes it really cool. I'm a real huge fan of this as a bittering agent, but I'm also a huge fan of the one that I use today, which is the original from Italy, from Select. I love these two styles. They're so contrasting in flavors, and I kind of bring it everywhere I go.
Thanks. That's all we have for questions.
Great.
Awesome.
I think we've taken about all our time here, Troy. We certainly appreciate you coming on, and we thank everybody who tuned in to watch us. And hopefully we'll be doing more of these in the future. But as we go, cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much for having me today, Dawson. It's truly an honor, a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing everyone at the bar soon and getting things back to the new normal.
Yes.